And a very warm welcome to you wherever you may be. My name is Bayo Adewusi. For whatever reason, the general impression seems to have been that those engaged in politics end up in that arena because they lack something better to engage their attention. This notion might have been true at some point of our political development, but a cursory look at our National Assembly and our various state assemblies puts a lie to this notion. Need I remind you also that the politicians at the forefront of our fight for independence were erudite, compassionate, and patriotic. The question that throws itself up at different fora in our political public discourse is, if the political leadership seems to be that astute, why are we still grappling with political naivety and intolerance? These are some of the issues my guest today will address. You'll meet him if you don't change your dial. My guest today is an astute politician and ranking senator who represents the Ondo North Senatorial District in the Senate. First elected into the Senate in 2003 on the platform of the PDP, a party to which he still belongs. A lawyer by training, my guest has a doctorate degree in law. He belongs to a number of committees including Navy, National Planning, Foreign Affairs, Employment, Labor and Productivity, Downstream Petroleum, Defense, and the Army. Please welcome Senator Bode Olajumoke. Senator Olajumoke, a very warm welcome to you.
Thank you.
Senator Olajumoke, you've been in the Senate now. This is your second term, so you're referred to as a ranking senator. Do you think you and your colleagues in the different space of time have made any appreciable difference to the developmental issues in Nigeria today?
Thank you very much, Bayo. Let me make a correction. I'm just in my first term. I've been in the Senate 2.5 years now.
Okay.
So
I don't know how I got that impression.
Yeah, I'm not yet a ranking senator in the real sense. But let me say that with regards to the question, we have quite a number of high quality senators in the current 6th Senate. A host of them former governors, ex-permanent secretaries in ministries, lawyers, accountants, doctors, medical doctors, people who have held positions in various fields of learning. And you can see retired generals, and you can see in discussions during debate in the sessions or at committee levels that one benefits from the array of experiences these people have garnered over the years. Let me take my committee, for example, the Navy. I have on my committee 2 retired generals, 1 colonel, and I've found them very, very useful during committee deliberations, especially when we're performing our oversight functions across the naval formations. So, yes, in that sense, I believe we have, quite a good setup in the place.
Yes, but some people would argue that these are the same set of people who were responsible at different levels and at different stages for the problems that Nigeria faces today. Yes, they've had opportunities of leadership, but the generality of the public isn't experiencing anything more heartwarming. Is that a fair assessment?
Yes and no. Yes, in that, maybe before now they were in certain positions which, are not as reflective of the problems of the nation. I believe that from my own assessment, I believe they've been making positive contributions in terms of motions and resolutions and their contributions at debates. They bear in mind that the at the Senate level, we can only make recommendations. We are not the executive arm, and I have frowned over the fact that numerous resolutions and motions passed at the Senate level have just been mere resolutions, unlike in the United States of America, where resolutions carry the power of law. We carry resolutions on infrastructures, problems of in aviation, bad roads, and the rest of it. We do not execute. We can only draw the attention of the executive arm to these problems.
But you have oversight functions, don't you?
Yes, and that's where we, in the past, with due respect, the oversight function had not been that taken seriously. But it's only this particular Senate, and I think to an extent also the House of Reps, that have taken the issue of oversight seriously, monitoring of appropriated funds with the view to ensuring that if you requested for X amount of money to carry out certain projects, it's the duty of the legislature to find out how far you have done, how much you have executed, you know, in terms of what you got money for. And I think to that extent, you know, I would say the legislature is on top of it.
Yes, sir, but when Nigerians consider government and governance, we're not pigeonholing the judiciary, legislature, and the executive. We expect that after so many years, I mean 10 years of unbroken democratic dispensation, there should be some element of understanding, cooperation, and synergy between these three arms of government. Why don't we see that?
You talk about 10 years of democracy. Of course, you recall that in the last administration, you had all sorts of rancor, rift between the executive and the legislature. For quite a long time, the legislature could not perform, basically because the executive misconstrued its own powers vis-a-vis that of the legislature in terms of separation of powers. But we want to concede it to the present executive that to a very large extent the concept of separation of powers is in play, is being allowed to work. There had been no interference of whatsoever in the running of the legislature. And you also bear in mind that the legislature had been the weakest of the three arms of government.
Why do you say so?
Because of the long military rule in this country. When the military, since independence, you recall that out of the, how many years, 49 years of our existence, we've had how many years of military rule? And during those period, the legislature is abolished. You only have the executive and that's the military, and of course the judiciary. So if you minus those years of military rule, you then can determine how long the legislature had been. So is the weakest in terms of
being an institution.
In terms of being an institution, so it lacks capacity building, experience, and maturity. In the last legislature, for example, there were all sorts of problems, problems of accommodation, problems of staffing, and you know you need to build those staff. When you talk about advanced democracies, these staff, they've been there for ages. We suffered that in the Nigerian legislature. It's now, thank God, we have 10 years. We can count 10 years now. And I read the literature of the last legislature, and I can see, you know, remarkable improvement in the way we are doing things now. Oversight function has become more constant. last year I went on oversight function twice in my main committee. So
Which is?
Navy.
Okay.
That's where I'm the chairman of the committee. So I believe if we have had no intervention from outside, if democracy had been allowed to grow as it should be, we probably would have made substantial progress.
So you speak of the conflicts that we had experienced in the past, particularly between the executive and the legislature. Now, does the personality of the person at the helm of affairs determine to a large extent the dynamics and interplay between these two bodies?
Absolutely, absolutely. The personalities, especially in the presidential system, where we have almost absolute power being controlled by the president, and in the last administration, we had the personality of Chief Olusegun Obasanjo. You also, consider his military background, and certainly there's a wide gap between his personality and that of the current president. So yes,
but should the personalities make a difference? If there are ground rules, if things are laid down in black and white, shouldn't there be definite strictures, and one's personality should be pushed to the back burner? It doesn't work that way in practice.
It does. It should. But you see, the structures must be on ground. The structures must be on ground. In the last administration, over a long period, there was the tussle between who has control. Indeed, you'll be surprised to hear that the last administration felt that it should have a say in how the legislature was being run, which negates the principle of separation of power. So, and again, you look at the background of the leadership at every given time. Nigeria has been very unfortunate in that we've not had leadership emerging from the grassroots as such. We've not had leadership that reflected the yearning and aspirations of the masses in terms of reaching out to them and throwing whatever he or she has to the masses. So is leadership being trusted on willing hearts, people who just found themselves, at the position of leadership. And of course, again, because we've not had the, enough time to experience democracy, we had this problem.
So yes, okay, we've had 10 unbroken years of democratic dispensation. The last election has been described as imperfect, both by the local players and international observers, and that has brought the need. Mr. President talked about electoral reforms, and as a matter of fact, they're being instituted. But some members who sat on the Presidential Electoral Reform Committee say not enough is being done, and if we do not do the things we're supposed to before the 2011 general elections, then we might be heading in a negative direction. Do you see things differently?
Happily, I believe at least from the legislature, we're having positive signals. The Senate Committee on the Review of the Constitution just concluded, I believe, 3 days of public hearing, and also had a retreat before then. And I sat for 2 days at the public hearing, and I think we are moving in the right direction. The attitude is not to have a holistic approach to the review, but to look at the critical issues,
such
as electoral reform. I mean, that had been the major thing. Is on record. I was the first to acknowledge. I'm a member board of trustees of the party PDP, but I believe I was the first to acknowledge that the the process was flawed. And of course, I recall vividly the day I said that. I got a call from a family friend who is a director in the SSS to chastise me and say, look, that was a dangerous comment by you. And I said, yes, that was the way I saw it. About 5 minutes after the individual called me, I got another call from a retired DIG and said, that was the first time we will hear a politician speak the truth. And of course, shortly after that, President-elect Umaru and former president acknowledged that the process was flawed. I believe if we handle the electoral reforms, looking at the committee report, the Uwais committee report, I believe that will go a long way, because that will be the foundation for whatever we are looking at. And of course, there have been issues like correcting the inequality in terms of state creation, looking at the local government. I think those are the critical issues to my mind. But of course, the people themselves have to decide. And that's why the committee will be going around, I think next Monday, going to the zones to hold public hearings there and get a feedback from the people.
Senator Olajumoke, so that underpins the fact, or the view in some quarters, that politicians are not normally known to speak the truth.
Yes, I mean that's the common belief, but I believe more and more people are getting involved in politics, who have character, who have their pedigree, and I believe the more we have, this type of politicians, individuals, Nigerians getting involved in politics, the better for the nation. I believe that politics is a great institution, and we need the right caliber of people in there.
But at this point in time, you don't have the correct critical mass to evidently make a difference in the way things are run, do you?
No, we don't.
Okay.
We don't.
Now, to your mind, which comes first, the constitutional review or electoral reforms?
Well, you cannot have electoral reforms without, reviewing your constitution. But in terms of priority of the Constitutional Review Committee, I believe the electoral reforms is paramount. From the feedback we've got, I believe the electoral reforms, was it Kwame Nkrumah who said, seek ye first the political kingdom and every other thing will be added unto you. If we get it right in terms of who are the representatives of the people, if your votes count at the end of the day, you have the right people at the helm of affairs, then other things will follow. Every other thing will get straightened up.
Now, we talk about leadership in Nigeria, and leadership is not just restricted to the center. There's leadership at state levels. Yeah, at different levels. Do you think we need to be properly tutored on the course of leadership, or is it something that just evolves or you're born with?
Well, I believe leadership evolves. You don't trust it on individuals. You must have the background. You must have the traits. You also look, when we were young, I mean, we derived a lot from subjects such as civic and your parental, upbringing. They count very much. And I recall that when I was in school, my father used to admonish me whenever I was going back to school, remember the son of whom thou art. That was a great wise saying when I was young. And I grew up with that. And I believe the level of decadence in the society now is a reflection of the fact that we have lost it in terms of moral behaviors and upbringing. So leadership evolves, naturally. You don't beg for it. People will see it in you and then, of course, acknowledge it.
Yes, but in other political institutions, there seems to be like a form of tutelage. You're a junior minister or parliamentary secretary, and at that stage, they recognize your leadership traits and qualities, and it's tried, and they try to build it up. And I think in the very first republic, that was evident. The major leaders, Sarudana, Awolowo,
Yes.
Nnamdi Azikiwe, they had people who learned at their feet.
Yeah.
And when they left, subsequently, to a large extent, took over. Do we need to go back to processes of that nature?
Obviously, I believe there's a need for us to have leaders who have clear visions. The unfortunate situation had been that the leadership had no vision. You can only give what you have. So if you have a leadership that has ideas, look, all over the world, the great nations of this world have gotten to the place where they are by virtue of one or two people who have ideas getting together and saying this is how we should go. You talk about the Asian tigers, the whole idea of revolution in economies of those Asian tigers, arose from the concept of one or two leaders. And that leader identifies like minds, not more than 5. And these ones are the ones that pivot the affairs of the nation. And in the process, because they are sincere, because they have, you acknowledge that they have something to give. In the process, they are also grooming. People are learning from their feet. They cultivate the habits and traits of those leaders. So, because those leaders have ideas, they're able to impact it down the line. You talk about Sadana, you talk about Awolowo, Azikiwe, and those great leaders, Bode Thomas. They were well brought up from their homes. They had very solid foundation. They were not groomed from outside. It was part of them, and they stood out. Bear in mind the junior ministers you're talking about. They were identified by these leaders and so acknowledged. And I think until we do that, until we have right leadership with vision, who have ideas on how to move this nation in terms of our economy, in terms of our politics, in terms of our development. Until we have that, and you see, that means knowledge is power. The leadership must have knowledge of what they're talking about. When the leadership lacks knowledge, then it gropes about in the dark, and then you have setbacks. Honestly, until we have the right leadership, we will not make much progress.
So just to encapsulate what you said, somebody once said that the doors of history swing on the hinges of a very few. So education in Nigeria, the universities were closed for such a long time. They're back on stream now, but there is this complaint all over that the qualitative education that we used to know is no longer in place. What do you see fundamentally wrong with our process of education in this country?
Well, I was a pro-chancellor of a university for 4.5 years, Adekunle Ajasin University. Basically, and my experience in that university showed me that governments at all levels, federal and state, have been paying lip service to the question of education. There are certain basic requirements in any institution, so-called tertiary institutions. The infrastructures must be there. The quality of the lecturers must be there. You must have the environment for learning. Major problem is inadequate funding. inadequate funding. I believe we have the raw materials in terms of qualified lecturers, eggheads, but we haven't got serious attitude towards funding of university. I think this is a major problem.
And how can that be done differently? Because in other climes, institutions such as Cambridge, Oxford, Harvard, that have been there for centuries, do not have a problem with funding.
Yeah, because well, we tried an experiment. We made a proposal when I was in Adekunle Ajasin University to the state government that perhaps we should encourage the council chairmen, councils, the various councils in the 18 local governments to dedicate a percentage of their allocation towards funding of education in the state. But unfortunately, this had not been carried out, and the state government hasn't got the capacity. They haven't got it because they have so many contending issues they are fighting with.
So does the federal government.
So does the federal government. But I think you must set your priorities right. Knowledge is power. Once you have an educated society, then every other thing, falls in place. And I think government must sit down and look at all the contending requirements and then decide this is our priority. You cannot toy with education. An educated society is a primitive one, and it cannot make any progress. So I believe funding is a critical factor in the issue of education in Nigeria.
Sir, quite a number of Nigerians have blamed the change in the psyche of the Nigerian, attitudinal changes on the long incursion of the military in government and governance. You have been closely associated with the military over a period of time. Do you think that claim holds any water?
Well, I don't know. Well, maybe to an extent you say yes, because the military had dominated the Nigerian climate for so long. But what happened after the military left? We still have the same decay in the system. I believe the discovery of oil, petroleum in the country was the beginning of our problem, really, because
but shouldn't that be a blessing, sir?
It should have been a blessing, but it's a curse, as it were, because unlike in the Middle East, where they have turned that asset to a great benefit, we are suffering because of this important element. I believe that suddenly there was this emergence of millionaires, and people ran into money, and money became the critical issue. People lost their manners and couldn't be bothered about any other thing. The lifestyles change, and we emphasize on those irrelevant things in the society. Money becomes so critical that is a deciding factor. There are basic values in civilized society. Saying I'm sorry for a wrong done to your neighbor and thank you for a good deed. Those are elements of civilized society. But we lack it in this our climate. And I believe that no matter.
Was that as a result of the military?
Well, because of the new lifestyle. The new lifestyle of the Nigerian, as a result of the sudden money we found from petroleum. But
does that have any connection with the military?
Well, of course, the military, they to a very large extent were not under anybody's. It was like a dictatorship of a sort. There was no arm of government that could caution, and they were not afraid of any criticism from any side. absolute dictatorship. So yes, to an extent, yes, but the lifestyles became infested because of the affluence of the society. And I believe until we change that, no matter the investment we bring into this country, except we change our lifestyles and look at those critical issues, we'll continue to have problems.
So, some cynics say that politicians don't have principles. You could be in party A today, and for the lust of power, you switch to party B tomorrow. That there are no principles, there's no deep-seated, deep-seated principles are absent. And you were very, first of all, involved with the military. In what capacity? Was that foisted on you, or did you, because you were said to be very close to some of our former military generals, Abacha, Babangida. How did you come to be intimately involved with our former military leaders?